All right, thank you for having me today. I was supposed to be presenting with one of my colleagues, Martin, who unfortunately had a family emergency come up, so I'm going to try and do the best I can. So we're going to talk a little bit about two things, which is Ohana and Pattern Lab at the university. And so basically I'm going to talk about what is Pattern Lab, how we use it inside Drupal, how we specifically at UW use it, some design decisions, from basically the corner offices. I know Joe talked a little bit about that, and then one of the biggest advantages that we've had is parallel coding. So what is Pattern Lab? And so Pattern Lab is an open source web design system and development tool. It helps teams create and organize reusable components and design templates for websites and apps, and it uses atomic design, and it's able to be used as a living style guide, so we are able to do that. And the big thing is design decisions can be made way before the Drupal code is even written. And this has been the biggest advantage that we've had. We moved from when we were doing Drupal 7, which meant that we used all those great PHP templates, and that all had to be created before the CSS and all the front end was applied. In the case now, when we use this, is the front end can be developed even before we start coding, and all those decisions are made. So atomic design, if you haven't seen it before, you start with atoms, which we call base, your smallest pieces, like you see the magnifying glass or a little home button. You move into molecules, which combine a couple of things together, some of these atoms together. We call them layouts, but they're the same sort of thing. Then you have organisms, or what we call components, which combine multiple molecules together, and you get the whole system. So you can see it builds one upon the other, and totally reusable. One of our big advantages is the living style guide. And so basically you could see every component within our site. One special thing about us is we have 5 faculties, well 6 really, but that each have their own color and color scheme, and we're able to show what each faculty will look like with their color scheme on each component. So when you view our living style guide, it's a huge document, but we're able to break it down and show each component. You can see some of the components here scrolling across the screen. But it's nice that when we build all these components, like there's some of the colors you see coming across, they're able to be approved without even having written a piece of code yet. So how do we do this? We combine Drupal and Pattern Lab. So we've been through a couple of iterations of this. We started out with Emulsify, which was whoever it was, 4 Kitchens. Then they sort of dropped Pattern Lab, went to Gesso. They sort of dropped Pattern Lab. So now we're on Ohana. So Ohana is maintained by Chad Strumley, and it was the URL there. Basically, it takes core Pattern Lab, puts some wrapping stuff around it to compile all the Sass and the JS and all kinds of other default stuff, and then produces the code. Actually, all of us staff were trained by Chaz, and we started using Ohana. Okay, so how do we get from, you've seen sort of the living style guide, you've seen how you can see components. I'm going to go into a quick dive on how we do this. There is so much that goes into this. Martin and I actually did a talk at the Waterloo Drupal users group. We took 2 hours to kind of explain how this is done. I'm trying to do it in 10 minutes. So, but basically I have some code written, written some services that'll start getting content from Drupal. It's kind of quasi decoupled, saying that we're not using a lot of the Drupal stuff, but I'm getting all the great structured content out of Drupal and passing it on to Pattern Lab. So I use this service, one magic service, to sort of get all the content out. Then for each content type, I have a whole bunch of functions that will go and get the content by field, which you'll see in the next one. But basically each content type will say, go get me the content. Then by each field, I can get the content, and it's nice because I can say by field name, by like field type, that I can go get the specific content, and it gets it out in the pattern, or the way that we're doing it in Pattern Lab, it gets out the right variable names. Once that's done, then on the preprocess node is where I could just say get the content, basically. There's a function there for get node content, pass along the node, and it just knows to get everything. Again, a lot more complex than that, but that's basically how it works. Then how do we do that into passing into Ohana? So, when we have blocks, how do I pass it to Ohana? We just took the approach that when we do any sort of block or content, it's an array, so you use the name and then dot whatever variable name. So Martin, who does most of the front end, knows that it's always going to be whatever we're going to name it, dot variable name, dot variable name. So that way we're only passing around one variable instead of multiple variables. So you can see when I'm getting in my build functions for all the blocks is just put all the variable names. So basically Martin designs the block inside Pattern Lab, says I need these 5 variables from you that represent these 5 things, and then I go into the build function, grab those things out, put it in an array, and send along to Ohana, and it just works. And then all we have to do to pass it to Ohana is we use the components module, and you just inside, there's a little bit of setup, but you just say at components, whatever component it is, and you pass along, in our case, because we said it's an array, we just pass along one variable for the blocks. And then when we do the node, it's a little more complex because there's a lot of stuff going on. But you can see our template just keeps passing it along to all the components. Now, this was one of the biggest advantages. That was quasi-technical and pretty quick, but one of the big things is all the design decisions happen before the Drupal code. So somebody can write up or do up a mock-up of what it could look like, in Adobe or whatever. And then Martin's able to pull that out, put it inside Pattern Lab, just using the YAML files and being able to show what it's going to look like. And then all these C offices or corner offices, whatever you want to call them, can approve the design without even us as the backend developers having to touch it. And so in one of our most recent projects, we did a Waterloo news block. And this was a big thing. We're doing a whole homepage redesign, but it was a big design part on the front end, but on the back end, our whole API had to be rewritten, and then the whole block had to be written. And it was nice because Martin and I basically parallel coded. He did all the front end stuff, went through multiple revisions, went to multiple people. He got it all approved using Pattern Lab without touching any of my stuff. I was able to do all the API stuff, get all the block stuff, get all that logic figured out, and then in about an hour and a half, we had the whole thing connected together. So that's the big power that we see now with Pattern Lab, is being able to do that kind of parallel coding and the reusability of certain components. Like in this events block, this is just a card on a variation that we were able to reuse something we wrote 2 years ago. So that was our big thing. All right, I hope that was 10 minutes. Thank you very much.